consistency with corals in general, just keeping the water as consistent as possible. That's our whole goal. Like keeping a reef tank, your whole goal is to keep the water like pristine, stable, and just about as close as you can to the same parameters constantly, because you want those corals, to thrive. You want them to be able to grow and thrive, and if you want that, you're going to have stable water conditions. If you have water conditions that are jumping all over the place, your corals aren't going to be able to secrete themselves and grow like they should. So consistency is definitely where it's at.
In today's episode, we're continuing the conversation about common mistakes that you can have in this hobby. And joining me, of course, is Levi Peterson, the oddball reefer. How's it going today, Levi?
It's going good. How about yourself?
Things are fine. I'm still battling the green hair algae in the reef tank. Been trying to update the Reef Fanatics and everything on YouTube with videos about my current struggle with the green hair algae. But we got that Fiji foxface rabbitfish in there now, a whole bunch of pincushion urchins in there, and I boosted up the cleanup crew. So things are going. They're getting better.
Sweet.
So today we're going to continue that conversation that we had a few episodes ago. We talked about 5 common mistakes that you can run into or that you can do if you're brand new in the hobby or if you're experienced in the hobby. Some of these mistakes, if you just get used to things over a while or you fall off or whatever, you can start making mistakes. And there's some common ones that happen in the hobby. So today we got 3 more for everybody. Let's jump right into the very first one is poor water quality management. So neglecting regular water testing and changes can lead to unstable water parameters because our corals, they love stability.
Absolutely.
Right. That's a big thing that you hear all the time is keeping your tank stable, keeping your water parameters stable, because that's going to yield the best results. But what do you think about this mistake of poor water quality management?
It's pretty important. Consistency with corals in general, just keeping the water as consistent as possible. That's our whole goal. Like keeping a reef tank, your whole goal is to keep the water like pristine, stable, and just about as close as you can to the same parameters constantly, because you want those corals, to thrive. You want them to be able to grow and thrive, and if you want that, you're going to have stable water conditions. If you have water conditions that are jumping all over the place, your corals aren't going to be able to secrete themselves and grow like they should. So consistency is definitely where it's at.
Yeah, and one of the big things is like salinity, right? If you have if your salinity is off, then things aren't going to do well, or if it fluctuates a lot. So if you're not keeping up with your auto top off or your water changes, or even checking your salinity when you're doing your water quality maintenance, if it just gets saltier and saltier, that can lead to a bunch of issues, coral die off, and all of that. Another thing is testing. How often do you recommend testing your aquarium, and how often?
Yeah, absolutely. I personally test 2 of my systems once a week. The nano tanks, I just do water changes weekly, so I'm not as intensively testing those tanks unless I see something wrong. Because they're doing really great, and as long as everything's doing okay in them, I'm happy. With the bigger tanks like the Caribbean and this tank over here, I do test weekly just to kind of keep tabs on it, because I got some more expensive stuff in there, as well as some like nicer corals, that I gotta definitely keep up on. But yeah, I definitely recommend testing your water. Just like I do weekly for the most part. That's probably the best way to go about it. Try to keep up with weekly water changes. And there's people that will totally disagree with us on this and say, hey, like as long as everything looks good all the time or whatever, it's totally fine. I think it's called like the reef shiners method or whatever, like the people that just don't do water changes or whatever, kind of let things go. I don't necessarily recommend that. because I've done that before and had things arise, and then it's harder to get rid of it because you let it go on for so long. And you either didn't notice it or you didn't think it was a big problem, and then it became a big problem. So it's best just keep your tabs on things, test your water, keep up with your
Mhm.
quality, make sure everything's stable and in the right area, and you should be good. So.
Yeah, yeah, and to that point, I mean, I think like the average reefer or the reef fanatic that is watching the Coral Reef Talk here, um, we have busy lives, right? We got things going on.
Absolutely.
We are doing this as a hobby, something for fun, something to enjoy. Maybe we had a long day, relax in front of the reef aquarium, watch the corals, watch the fish, um, and so. Um, I think for not doing water changes, some of those methods may be very tedious for the average reefer to, I guess, consider in their day to day because you have to dose certain elements, keep tabs on everything. Whereas a lot of the time, doing water changes and being consistent, you're going to yield the same results. I mean,
Hmm.
you're going to have success if you're doing consistent water changes, testing your tank. When you test your tank, you know how much of your elements your corals are using, and then if you are doing like two-part dosing or like kalkwasser and stuff, you know how to make adjustments based on that, and then doing a water change is going to replenish some of those things that get depleted. And then also it's beneficial if you have like, for me, I've been dealing with green hair algae, and we'll get to that in our next mistake, but going through that, you want to get into your tank and pick that algae off of the rockwork, right? So I've been picking algae off of the rockwork. I've been siphoning the sand, doing water changes, and I noticed in the past when I wasn't doing that, I mean, it only goes so long.
Hmm.
And then once neglect on either your equipment sets in, like for me, my protein skimmer wasn't working properly. I had like my refugium light go out. A couple things that happened to the tank that I wasn't on top of. And so once that neglect sets in on that, then bad things, of course, are going to happen. So,
Absolutely.
but yeah, so the next point is overfeeding. So feeding too much or too often can lead to water pollution, algae blooms, and nutrient imbalances. So like phosphates, nitrates, gonna go crazy.
Hmm.
If you're dumping too much food in the tank, but you're not exporting it properly or getting rid of it, it's not being filtered out of the tank. Plus, you're not doing water changes. Um, you're just going to get one of the things, a whole bunch of algae.
Yeah, I mean, it's just going to keep building up over time.
Mhm.
And I mean, some people say, like, I believe certain corals, help remove some nutrients and stuff, but it gets to a point where if you're feeding constantly and you never do a water change, I mean, that nutrient is definitely going to build over time. And like, you'll have zones in your tank, like called quote unquote dead zones, where
Mhm.
stuff will just kind of settle up over time and just build up. And I have that in even a couple of my tanks, every time I'm doing a water change, even if it's like a week down the road, I notice like in this one specific corner of my tank, a lot of stuff builds up and it's a lot of nasty gunk and stuff that just needs to be removed from the tank. That can be also fixed with just adding, a different power head or adjusting your flow just to kind of prevent all that buildup in that specific area. But just in general with overfeeding, I mean, the more you feed, the more your nutrients is going to build up. Even if your fish are eating all that, they're obviously pooping. So, I mean, it's going to build up over time regardless. So, yeah, just try to keep up on your maintenance, test your water parameters, kind of see how things are going. I have this app on my phone that I use kind of like when I test, I put it in there. That way I can see kind of how things are progressing as far as parameters go. Like nitrates, like, oh, my nitrates went up like a few points this week. Like I kind of need to step up on the water changes or figure that
Mhm.
out some way. But yeah, I mean, overfeeding can definitely hurt your reef tank. And I know a lot about overfeeding because I mean I've had NPS tanks and stuff that need to be fed a lot. So the maintenance is just you got to heavy upkeep, keep doing those water changes, and have
Mhm.
different ways to remove it.
Yeah, for sure. And like, I mean, it's fun feeding your fish. But I mean, they don't have to eat constantly. You can feed them a few times a day for a few minutes a day, and everything's going to be fine with them. And if you
Absolutely.
miss a day, if you miss 2 days in most cases, hey, they're going to be fine.
Yep.
But yeah, overfeeding is a big, I think it's a pretty common mistake because you get excited, right? You get your first few fish in your aquarium and things are taking off. You're a few months into it. Usually, well, I would say, after the first couple months, your tank is looking pretty nice. So
hmm
you're super excited. And then, yeah, you can easily overfeed the tank because it's fun to watch the fish interact with all of that.
Absolutely.
So one thing I wanted to do a little bit differently in today's episode is I'm on Instagram all the time. Instagram, YouTube, it's probably the two big places that I'm posting or watching things. And something came across my screen the other day, and many of you out there may know about this already, but I saw it for the first time. And let me pop this up on the screen here. This right here is the world's first and only automated frozen fish food feeder. What do you think about that? I saw this pop up and I was like, wow, finally someone has done it, because we've talked
Yeah,
about
I
this.
mean that's crazy.
Yeah, we've talked
And
about
I'm
this on a
just
previous episode. Like how can we automatically feed our frozen food to the tank? And someone kind of figured this out.
yeah, I'm just so curious how like it works. Like it's just super
Yeah, so
curious.
this is, so it looks like you have, of course, you have a reservoir to put your food in there.
Okay.
Um, and then it keeps it refrigerated. And then you see I think there's two lines coming out of the bottom here. Let's see if I can pull up the details here. Here we go. So it has the capacity to hold over 50 cubes of frozen food. So you can fill that thing up. Let's
Yeah.
see. It's able to keep frozen fish food in liquid form and keep it fresh for a minimum of 20 days. Um, so you can, let's see, precision of feeding. You can tailor your feeding regime to, or regimen to, 5 milliliters to 50 milliliters per feeding. So the way I understand it, you can program it to automatically feed, or you can like push a button like a feed mode and say, hey, I want to feed it now, which is really cool. And I think I have a video clip of it. Let's take a look at that. This is how many cubes of frozen that it can hold right here. 50 cubes. But what are your thoughts? Would you pick up something like this? You think it's a game changer?
It might be. I mean, I think it'll tell time with like people start getting it and trying it out and just seeing how it works. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, so you take all that food, you put it in that reservoir, and it keeps it nice and cold. Um, yeah, it looks very simple to use. You plug it in, you program it. It has the aquarium mount that will mount on the side of your tank. Um, let's see this video right here. And then it comes with the cleaning kit right there. Prepare multi-food loadouts. Oh, so you can have food ready, I guess, to drop it in.
It's pretty
But,
crazy.
but yeah, you can see it just mounts over there. There's two lines. And then also it periodically cleans itself, but I guess after so many uses, you have to get in there with the little brush and scrub it and clean it yourself. But it's pretty neat.
So that's pretty cool. I'm kind of glad to see that come out and see how reefers utilize it and see how it goes.
Yeah, because I mean, so I think it was Devin at Reef Dudes. He did like a DIY version with like one of those small refrigerators that you get
Mhm.
from like Amazon or something. But I always wondered about the food that kind of stayed in the
Sits in the
line.
tube. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So with this kind of, I guess it cleans the line for you, so nothing's trapped in there, and just drying out and like breaking down. So that's good. I'm interested to learn more about it,
Mhm.
as it, I guess they get more and more involved in the industry. All right. So scientific segment, Levi, what do you got for us?
Today we got the yellow clown goby. I love one. We got one in Elizabeth's tank here. It's a super bright fish and it's very personable. It's going to sit like mid-level in the water column, and they're relatively hardy. A lot of people, my only concern with these is they don't really take the pellets right away. In fact, I usually have to use either live brine shrimp or frozen brine to get them to actually start eating really well, and then slowly start to incorporate pellets from there. But they're such a great fish. They're really cool. They're really hardy if you get them eaten. And it's a different color that pops in your tank. You don't see yellow very often, especially now that we don't really get yellow tanks in the hobby other than the aquacultured ones. So yeah, it's just a cool little fish to have in a nano tank and even bigger tanks. You can appreciate it because it's going to be very personable, easy to spot, and it'll kind of sit out mid-water column and be interactive with you. So
Yeah, they're a pretty cool fish. There's what's the other one that's it's like a greenish
there's actually a
yellow.
bunch. Like at my work, we get in like probably 5 or so varieties of these. You're gonna
Okay.
get like the black clown goby, yellow clown goby, red clown goby, green clown goby, and you get some other crazy different varieties that come in too.
Gotcha. That's probably what it was, just a green clown goby, but had one before. They kind of like chill on the bottom sometimes. They'll
Yep.
just sit there on their rock and just hang out. They're pretty small fish too, so you can
Yeah.
keep them in a smaller aquarium if you don't have a large tank. Like,
Absolutely.
cool. And how do you say the scientific name again?
All right. Gobiodon okinawa.
Nice. Awesome. Now, beforehand, you were mentioning a crazy fish that we're going to get into. You want to get into that fish right now?
Yeah,
The
let's do it.
article that just popped up?
So I just saw this article today. It's
Oh,
super cool, but also super crazy. You got your typical like blue cleaner wrasse, that'll go around and pick parasites or kind of clean up the bigger fish in like a reef tank or even like in the ocean on the reefs. And I was reading this today, and it just reminded me we've gotten these in before actually at my work. It's a I believe it's a blenny that resembles the cleaner wrasse. And it looks so much like them that they get close enough to the fish where they can actually bite the fish and like eat. Like they just take a chunk out of the fish. And I mean, you look at this thing right here, you can see it's like the bottom look like gnarly fangs pretty much. And then it looks like the top's kind of just like a nice, tooth pretty much that's able to scoop a piece of flesh out. It's pretty crazy.
yeah, that's insane. Those are some pretty big fangs on a tiny fish there.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. We've gotten them in before at my work, and it's like, whoa.
Dang. So it disguises itself as a cleaner wrasse and just attacks.
Yeah,
That's
pretty
pretty
crazy.
crazy. False cleaner fish. Yeah, so definitely, I know one of the mistakes we talked about in a previous episode was doing your research. Definitely research and know what you're getting if you're trying to find a cleaner wrasse. Make sure you're not getting this false cleaner fish
Yeah, would not
by
be.
mistake. Yeah, that would not be good at all.
I can only imagine like you got a giant tank set up with some beautiful tanks or something in it, and you get one of those, and you didn't
Oh my
realize it was the false cleaner fish, and you start seeing little chunks just gone out of the fish. That'd be
Yeah,
terrible.
dude, that would not be good. Oh my gosh, I cannot imagine. Um, wow, that is a crazy fish. And it does look almost exactly like a cleaner wrasse.
Yeah.
So here we go in the article. How do we tell one apart here? Um, so how do you identify one? Initially, it would be difficult to differentiate between a cleaner wrasse and a mimic, but once you have figured one out, the rest will be easy. The following are some features. So the size, I guess, is a little different.
Hmm.
Uh, most of the time, the mimics are larger, and then its movement and behavior are different. Mimics act completely like other blennies would, hiding in crevices and giving the chance to, and only poking its head out. Okay, so yeah, because a cleaner wrasse, you see it kind of swimming
Swimming
around
around.
most of the time in the water column. So this guy's going to stop and perch, hide. So that's a good way to kind of, if you see that in your local fish store, let them know that might
Stay
be
away.
yeah, stay
Stay
away.
away.
Stay away. Did you know that I wrote my first ever children's book? This is Finn the Brave Blue Tang, and it's available now on Amazon. So if you have little ones, go ahead and check out this book on Amazon. This is Finn the Brave Blue Tang. It's all about Finn and his adventure from the fish store to his home aquarium. And I wrote this for kids that may be struggling with meeting new friends, and this will help them become brave, show them that they can be brave, and meeting new friends are awesome. So check out Finn the Brave Blue Tang, available now on Amazon, link in the description below.
That's pretty cool. That's awesome, dude.
Thank you. Yeah, I've always wanted to write a children's book, and I finally sat down and wrote this one, and it's really cool. A lot of colorful pictures in there for the little ones.
Sweet.
So all right, well, we have one more common aquarium mistake for you in this episode, but it's I mean, it can be a good one and a bad one depending on how you look at it, depending on how you want your reef aquarium to look, I guess. What are your thoughts? Not accounting for growth. So
Yeah, so I mean, I see this all the time with like people on Instagram, like
mhm,
posting a picture of their tank and they got a bunch of different frags, like glued all over the rockwork. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, in like a couple months, those corals, especially some of the soft corals, are literally going to be running into each other. And you're going to have some of the acros that grow out straight into each other. And like, it's just a mess. And I see this all the time. Like, people posting, like, hey, this is like growing right into this. I didn't think it would get this big, yada, yada.
mhm,
Um, and it goes the same way with like even fish and stuff. People will buy fish for like their tank, and then it gets way too big, and it gets to the point where they're like, what do I do? Like, I got this huge fish in this small tank. I don't know what to do now. I didn't know it got this big. And it all kind of goes back to like doing your research, knowing how big this coral can get and what it's going to do and how it grows, so you can kind of decide where you're going to place it in your tank to keep it away from other
mhm.
corals and make sure it's not going to grow straight into them, so you don't just run right into issues.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, a lot of people, you can go to these coral conventions or your local fish store, pick up coral, and you just come home with a ton of coral, and then you're trying to figure out where you're going to put them, not realizing that they're going to grow right into each other, and just coral warfare and stuff in the tank. But I mean, there are some tanks where there's constant overgrowth like that as well,
Mm-hmm.
right? That where they do
And I
have.
mean, like I've seen tanks where like the stuff is like your goes back to parameters. Even like the parameters are so consistent, and it's so much like a natural like water that like the corals are growing into each other. And yeah, there's a little bit of like irritation, but it's not like they're like completely killing one another. Like
Right.
Julian Sprung Tank is an example of this. Like I went there one time, the corals are all huge, like literally right up against each other. But all the corals looked amazing. They're all healthy. Like
Mhm.
it's insane. They like overcrowd each other, and you get to the point where they're just trying to outgrow each other. It's pretty crazy. Instead of like seeing some tanks where they just start touching each other, and like one of the colonies ends up completely dead or half dead, and you have to like reassess the situation and frag up. Julian's tank was just incredible. It was crazy to see all
Yeah.
that like overgrowth and even touching of corals and not much of any issues.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, doing your research so you know what can kind of grow near or close to other corals, and even if it is gonna grow into another coral that might start like fighting each other or something, being proactive or just acting on that and getting in there and cutting some frags, right?
Mhm.
Or moving the
Exactly.
corals around. That's a way to um, kind of fix that issue.
Yeah.
I mean, it really does boil down to doing adequate research and knowing what your, I guess, knowing the goal for your tank, right?
Yeah, and I mean, one example specifically would be like Xenia or green star polyps. I
Hmm.
see people all the time when they're starting out their reef tank, like putting it on their main like structure, and then like over the course of a few months, like their whole structure is all GSP or Xenia, it's just taking over everything. So I mean, the best case scenario in those situations would be to like when you do start it out, as much as you'd like to just put it on your main colony or rockwork, just try to
Hmm.
seclude it onto its own little area, unless you're aiming for something like that, just to have, like, I've seen some pretty cool tanks with just a bunch of Xenia that are just, it
Oh
looks
yeah.
beautiful, all wavy and cool. But it also depends on really what you want it to look like down the road, too. You got to think, like, okay, I'm putting this here now. But eventually, I'd like to get like this thing that's more expensive to put somewhere on this rock. But if it's going to take this thing's going to take over the whole rock, I might want to put it somewhere else.
Yeah,
So
for
there's a
sure.
lot of thinking that really goes into it. Like especially like when you're first setting up your tank, like I was just saying, like just try to think of what your goal is for the tank, like Joey was just saying, and kind
Mhm.
of go from there.
Yeah, because I mean, I've had green star polyps overtake like colonies of zoanthids before, just
Hmm.
engulf them and just take over. Um, so yeah, having a plan, having a goal for your tank, and knowing the growth patterns of these corals before you put them in your reef tank. Um, but yeah, so back to not accounting for growth. Just to read this, it says adding too many corals or fish without considering their growth can lead to overcrowding, which we talked about, and competition
Hmm.
for space and resources, coral warfare, and fish aggression. Um, so yeah, you were talking about fish. That's another big thing. You have too many fish in your tank, they're going to be competing.
Yep,
Um, and then especially if you put a fish in there that's not quite compatible with the others, then that's a whole nother big issue.
absolutely.
Before we close the podcast, is there anything you would like to add to these three common mistakes, or any like solutions or advice to getting over these mistakes?
Yeah. So one is just keep up on your maintenance, and I mean, like I sometimes do this, like just keep an eye on your tank, see how your corals are doing. And if you start to see issues, obviously there's an issue, but it's also better just to keep up with your testing, keep up on your maintenance, just to make sure you kind of avoid those issues, And I mean, you're going to run into issues either way, but it's always best, be constantly testing your water parameters. And I recommend maybe just starting it once a week or even once every other week, just to kind of gauge and judge on how things are going and where it's going. And with the other things, I mean, space for corals, kind of like when you're first setting up the tank, plan it out. Take some time. Be patient with yourself, and kind of plan what you want to put where and what you want to get for that specific tank,
Hmm.
and your whole goal for the whole tank and its life. So, yeah, just keep all that in mind when you're setting up tanks. And that's it.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. When I first got into the hobby, I did well, even before, I did months and months of research and watching YouTube videos and trying to figure it out before I even got started. So that way, my tank had kind of a plan and a goal. Um, but yeah, water changes. Back when I had a 75-gallon tank, I was doing water changes every single week. And then
Hmm.
as I progressed in the hobby, I started trying different techniques and trying to learn from other people's successes. And then I got away from my water changes. Um, and so I think water changes are a big way to be successful. So getting back into my water change routine with this tank, especially with the green hair algae I've been going through.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, like there's been times where I'll go, a month or so without a water change. And in the
Mhm.
past, I've been very consistent recently on just keeping up with that. And like, oh man, everything's doing good. Everything looks great until it doesn't, until you
Yeah.
start to run into issues. And then it's like, man, like I just lost this and now this isn't looking good. And then you get back into the routine of doing water changes and everything's like, whoa, it's back. Like it
Bounces
looks
back. Yeah.
amazing. Like, so just being like I said, just trying to be consistent and setting aside some time just to dedicate to that tank that you like to come home to every day to just like, enjoy and look at and show off to other reefers. Just, yeah.
Yeah, and if you are someone like me that am I feel like I'm extremely busy all the time. You don't think you have time for your tank. You can have a great successful tank even with weekly testing and weekly water changes. Pick a day, be consistent, like you're saying, and do your water change, clean your equipment, check out your corals, test your tank. Make that one day to kind of go over all of that stuff.
Hmm.
Then go about your busy week, and you do that again, and just consistency over and over and over. You'll have a successful aquarium.
Absolutely.
There's three more common mistakes for you. If you've done any of these mistakes or any in the past episode, or you have even more mistakes that you would like to share with us, leave that in the comments section below. If you like this video, then I know you're going to like this video right here that's going to pop up on the screen. Thank you so much for watching, liking, and commenting, and we'll see you in the next one.
See ya.